Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with Season 8, Episode 53 of our weekly Q&A video/podcast. Links in the description if you're on the video, and BDCKR Gaming on YouTube if you're on the podcast for some reason. I think I'm saying that to a sum total of no one now. I think there was one person one time who knew about the podcast and not about the channel, or maybe two people. Was it that there was one person and then we asked and then there was one other person in the comment or something?
I think so, yeah. That sounds right.
But anyways, we theoretically this is a Q&A video, but practically this episode might have 0 Qs, depending on how this goes, because last week I promised what I think is a pretty good story about food service, and then you have some stuff you want to share about where you just were.
Yeah, well, and some people will be suspecting because last week's recap video was really kind of funky even for us, and I can explain why that was the case.
So first off, the promised story. This was like, I don't know, like a week and a half ago at this point.
Alright, so can I say though, I love this story. Like, I just want...
Oh, it's funny.
Yeah, okay.
So, it's gonna go a little long, but I think it really builds. So stick with it for the first couple minutes, even if you're not super engaged. But, I had never tried Red Lobster before. I had like the Cheddar Bay biscuits from home, but I never tried it.
Okay, can I say though, Red Lobster is very much an Anglo style of seafood.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the flavor depends on the creams and the sauces, and I feel like, you know, the flavor of butter can sometimes even overwhelm the flavor of whatever you have, like lobster, shrimp, and stuff. So I've never been a huge fan of Red Lobster, but I get why people have it, because if this is the kind of lobster and seafood that you're used to, it is very tasty. It's just a different kind of tasty when you have really fresh, unadulterated seafood. Yeah,
and so I love seafood, but I never tried Red Lobster before, so my friend was like, okay, we're going to go get Red Lobster. And so we were studying together, and we decided to call before we drove out.
Right.
So it would, be ready around the time when we were there, instead of, waiting like 20 minutes in like a Red Lobster lobby or whatever.
Right. In a world where you're eating out so much, you want it to be... in a world where you can eat out, you don't really want to be wasting so much time sitting around waiting for your food, or even if it's... anyway, sorry.
So the first thing that was really bizarre is that there was a long hold music thing. We had to go through an options menu and hit like number buttons where it's like, are you looking to like place an order? Press 1. And it was a lot like calling like your cell phone provider or like your internet provider or like some like customer support. Like, it was long, there was hold music, there was like a estimated wait time thing, and it said over 3 minutes, because I had imagined that that's probably the longest that they ever make you hold. But we ended up waiting about at least 10 minutes just to get past the hold for a restaurant.
So that's actually sophisticated. Was it like a central Red Lobster number, or was it the number for that location?
I don't remember exactly. I think it would... we looked up the number for the location, but I think it routed us through. But I don't know.
Because it's interesting, because that kind of where they make you wait a little bit is kind of sophisticated. They say, this is how long it's going to wait. That's usually big deal corporate kind of... Okay.
And so we called through... and then when we picked up, the person on the other end asked my friend to confirm the last 4 digits of her phone number, which was really weird, and then said, welcome back, her dad's name. I'm just going to say Chuck, which is not right, but
you've replaced the name to protect the identity of the people involved.
So, welcome back, Chuck. And what was... The weird thing is that the person on the other end asked my friend to confirm, so they heard my friend speak in a... clearly feminine voice. And it's not to say that, a woman can't be named Chuck. It was a very, like, dude-coded name. And it's not to say people can't be trans or non-binary or have a different voice.
Right.
But what feels weird is that it would never have been wrong to just ask and go, am I speaking to Chuck? Right? Especially after specifically confirming the number first, because you could have just started by it.
Or is this Chuck?
Yeah. So it was like, so my best guess is that the thought process was that the number went through. They had it on file as being Chuck, and then the person on the other end asked to confirm the last 4 digits. Like, that was somehow the confirmation that they were talking to Chuck, as opposed to, actually asking the person. And so my friend was like, I'm not Chuck, but hi. And the person on the other end was like, oh, hi, not Chuck. And so we put in our order. It was a Thursday special. We wanted to make a couple substitutions. So we asked about the first substitution, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to go check with the kitchen and see if that's okay. And we're like, oh yeah, and then off back to the sort of I don't remember if we were on hold music or if we were just put on hold at that time. But she was another couple minutes. So at this point, we've been on the call for at least like 15, 16 minutes, and we're like, we need to make another substitution. We weren't done. So the second they come back, we're going to need to ask for a second substitution and go off again. So they come back on.
What was the first substitution?
It was, I don't even remember specifically. It was, so there was a couple substitutions we made. We did a substitution of the dessert. We did a substitution of, because it was a Thursday special, like Wally shrimp or whatever it's called for coconut shrimp.
Right. Oh, okay.
And then we wanted, in addition, virgin pina colada in a to-go cup.
So what I want to point out, hearing the story, sort of looking in, is that this makes it sort of a memorable conversation. Like on their end. Right, somebody's talking to you. They're making a cracking joke, hi, not Chuck.
Yeah,
they're making these very distinct substitutions. So it's not.
They're a little sassy, a little funny.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And I will say we tried to order online, but for some reason the online order form only had like 40 characters worth of space for the substitution.
Less than a tweet.
Yeah, well, it didn't say for substitution. It said for special instructions, and it said don't like substitute anything that's like more expensive, right?
Right.
Basically, or something along those lines. Not the exact words. But so we're like, we can't get this in. There's not even enough information to say one substitution. We're like, substitute Wally shrimp for coconut shrimp. And then it cut us off before we could even do that. And my friend wanted to make multiple. So we're like, okay, let's just call.
Right.
So she comes back, and she goes, yeah, they said we can do that. There might be a small charge or whatever, and we're like, that's fine. We want to do these other things too. And then she was like, I don't want to just say that's okay. I don't want to promise you something and not deliver. I can maybe go back and check it. And we had waited so long. We had been on the call for more than 20 minutes at this point. We're like, let's just... We're like, that's okay. You can just put the stuff in as a special instructions or like check after you put the order through.
Right.
And if there's like a little upcharge or whatever, that's fine. Or if you can't do it, that's also fine. We'll just show up and the order will be what it is.
Yeah. Right.
And we're like, we're sorry for being such a pain in the butt. And she's like, oh, no. This is the most interesting order I've had to put through today, which already felt kind of weird because I don't know what is so interesting about just doing a couple substitutions.
Right.
But,
again, distinctive. Yeah. Memorable.
Yeah, and so then I said something, I'm like, oh, thanks, I'm not sure that's a compliment exactly, but that, I appreciate you not giving us a hard time. And then the line is dead, and we just don't hear anything back from her.
Right, it just cuts off, like, you talking, and then...
she's just not saying anything, so we're just like, hello? And then we wait for, maybe another 2-3 minutes, and then the call just disconnects, and we go, okay, well, we put our whole order through, she put it in, right?
Right.
Are they going to call us back? They don't call us back.
Right.
We're like, did the order go through? She didn't take our name. She didn't give us an estimated pickup time. And I'm saying she, it was a feminine voice. I shouldn't make that assumption.
Right.
But makes it easier to tell the story.
Right.
I should use gender neutral pronouns though. That's my bad. So yeah, they don't call us back. We're like, I have no clue. And so we're like, I guess we have to call back and check. So we call back. It puts us through the thing again. No waiting this time, but it knows that we just called, and it includes in the thing like thanks for calling back or whatever, and then puts us through. And so we go through, we get to get through the restaurant again. It's a new person this time, and we go, hi, we just think we placed an order. I don't know if we did. Can you please check for us? And so she asked for the last 4 digits of our phone number, and we say, here they are. Again, I should say they, but it's a new person. They asked for the last 4 digits of our phone number, and then they go, I don't know, what did you order? And then we go through the order, and they're like, oh, so you ordered the Thursday special, you ordered this substitution, whatever. And we're like, yeah, that's right. It was like you ordered the substitution of the Wally shrimp for coconut shrimp, and then you ordered it with the mussels and like a white wine sauce. And that was, the choice that we made and a substitution we made, and we're like, that's right, that's our order. Because that was the only stuff that we were sure had gone through, right?
Right.
And so the person on the other end goes, okay, so I have it. You ordered it, you said, like, just now, like, 10 minutes ago or whatever. And we're like, yeah, that's about right. And they go, okay, so we have it, but for some reason, the last person put it under Shelley. so that's interesting, but is it this order? And we go, that's exactly right, except they missed the stuff at the end, right? Which was the stuff that we hadn't gone through yet. Right. Our second substitution and the, like, virgin pina colada. And they said, okay, that's no problem. It'll be ready in, like, 20 minutes. I've changed it, right? Because they also asked us, like, whose name is it under? And we're like, well, we never gave the name. It would be under, like, not Gus, maybe? I don't know. Right? And so they're like, put Shelly. And so because our interaction with the first server was so weird, we're just like, I don't know. We, like, whatever. Right. And so we had our exact order, so we go.
So it seemed like that person might have just put an arbitrary name just to fill it because the phone got cut off.
Yeah, and because, like, you know, it seems like they're off their shift or something, or they're off somewhere else doing something else.
Right.
And so we drive out, we get there, I go in. Totally unrelated to the story, so I'm not going to make it long. There was, like, a whole argument going on.
So you arrived at Red Lobster, and there was a scene.
And I walked in, and somebody was yelling. And there was a big argument because this dude had gone out for his birthday. His parents were taking him out for his birthday.
And you knew this because they were yelling it.
Yeah, well, I heard the whole story just waiting to talk to the... to pay for our meal.
Right.
So he was yelling it was because it was his birthday, but he had his vaccine passport but forgot the wallet. With his ID, so he had no way of sort of verifying it was him.
Right.
And so there's this back and forth where one of the employees was like, listen, we need both of these to check you in. Right. This is, like, government, like, regulation. We can't let you eat in with this.
Right. They could lose their license. Like, they could end up failing their health inspection because of that.
But I also get why he was a little frustrated.
Sure.
Because his name was on his vaccine passport, and it was the same last name as his dad. And he was like, we came in for my birthday, and if you look, today is the birthday that's listed on the vaccine passport, right? So he was sort of angry because he felt like they should just let it slide because it was clearly him. And probably felt that the person he was talking to was being real stuck up, right? Or too much of, like, a stickler for the rules. And the person was just trying to do their best to, you know...
Right. They're usually not in a position to make big changes to corporate policy.
Yeah, and even just to let somebody sneak in. I mean, a lot of the nuance gets washed out if anybody ends up getting caught, right?
Right, correct.
So I'm sure they were just trying to cover their own butt, and I can't really blame...
You can't fault either of them.
I can't fault either of them that much. I can fault the guy a little bit for yelling so much.
Yeah.
And then... and I feel comfortable calling... the person a guy because both parents were also arguing on their behalf, and they kept saying our son, our son, our son.
Right.
But and he ended up just yelling and then being like, okay, let's go, and to his mom, and sort of ushering her out. But then the dad was still arguing with the person, and then he kept coming in and going like, come on, Dad, let's go, and he was swearing, and he's like, let's get the F out of here, like, F these people, seriously, I don't care anymore, like, let's eat somewhere else. And the dad was just still quietly arguing with the person, and then this son got pulled back into the argument again, and it was this whole scene. So I go in, and it's just, it's been weird, it's been really weird already. And then I show up, and I go, hey, I'm here to pick up an order, and they're like, who's it for? And I'm like, that's a good question. It's either for Susan or
Shelley?
It's for...
Is it Shelly? It's for Shelly? Okay.
Susan was the lady's actual name. They're a stranger to me, so I don't feel like I'm giving away any personal information. And I'm like, this is either for Susan or... And then I say my friend's name, or it's for...
not Chuck. Not Chuck.
Yeah. Not Chuck. And so then they go, did you say Susan? I think I had one here for Susan. I go, yeah. And they go, so wait, they're like, Susan just came and picked up your order. Like, Susan has your food. And I go, sorry? And then they're like confused. They pull somebody over, and then they're like talking among themselves. And they're like, so like, they're gone? Like, where's Susan now? And they're like, Susan left. Like,
she got her food.
Yeah, she took her food. She left. And then... so they're like, what's happening? I don't know. And so I piece it together before they do, and I go, oh my gosh, somebody placed the same order at the same time that we did. Ours never went through in the first place. And Susan, picked up the order that they placed, and just left with the food. Except all of the substitutions that we made.
Right, so there's some substitutions that were the same.
Yeah.
And then there were some additions
Most of the order was the same, yeah, but then...
There's other... So you screwed up Susan's
order
we
before
she picked it up.
We called in and mucked around with some random person's order. And so they're like, we're so sorry. We're going to rush order your food. 10 to 15 minutes. Whatever. They rung me up really fast. They were trying to figure out if anybody else had ordered the same food so that they could steal it from their order to give it to us right away.
Right.
And they're like, I'm so sorry. They were so rushing that they printed the stuff out before I finished the order because I wanted like extra biscuits.
Right.
And then the one person went back to ring it up, and the other person was like, just comp it, just give it to them. It's fine. And they also took an extra 20% off our order. So they were super apologetic. Right. Ready to be, I'm sure, mad like the person who was yelling from the moment I walked in the door. But I was just like, I was laughing at that point. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is so funny.
Except they were missing one thing.
Yeah, and so they put the order through, and then they call it to the bar, and they say, don't make the virgin pina colada. And I was like, oh, did Susan not take that? And they were like, yeah, Susan insisted that she never ordered a pina colada, and then didn't take it. And so then they're like, well, bring it out to the car, just let us know. And it's a gray Honda Fit, and I think it's like a 2014, and they're like, okay, that's more than enough information.
Hatchback. Right?
Yeah. They're like, what's the license plate? I'm like, I don't actually remember the license plate specifically. And so then the only thing that I'm like, it's just across from the doors, and they write down gray Honda. I see on the receipt, and then I pop back out to the car. And I'm like, we don't have our food, we have to wait. So we're waiting, laughing like the entire time because we're realizing
a comedy of errors.
All the things that have happened. It's just been ridiculous. We were on hold for like 30 minutes to order Red Lobster.
Right.
And just the whole thing has been really bizarre. And then we're waiting. It's been about, 10, 15 minutes. And we see somebody come out with a bag and then walk right to sort of the edge of the door and realize that there's a gray Honda hatchback parked right in front of the restaurant. And so they talk for a second, hand over the bag, and we go, oh my god,
Susan.
We go, okay. They talked. I'm like 99% sure that that's actually their order. But should I go in just for the day that we've been having to make sure they didn't just give away our food a second time?
Right.
And so I go in, and they're like, oh, sorry, I know you've been waiting, whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm not worried. And then I tell them, just the day we've been having, whatever. And then I'm just talking with the server, and they're like, nothing has ever happened like that before. It was so ridiculous. And I go, yeah, that's so weird. And the person I'm talking to was like, yeah, I was the person who actually edited your order. So when Susan came in and was like, I didn't order a pina colada, and I didn't order this and that, whatever, she was really confused. And I was trying to tell Susan, like, no, I just spoke to you on the phone. You called up, and Susan was trying to be like, I never did that, whatever. And my server was like, is this lady lying to me? I don't know what's going on. So we realized that we called and edited this random person's order, and they showed up, and the server, like, fully seriously looked them in the eye and said, you just called and changed your order. I talked to you on the phone, Susan. I know you made this modification. And then Susan must have been so confused and, like, just, not getting what she wanted, because we changed more than one thing.
Right.
So I'm assuming Susan probably had a little bit of trouble with...
That is not my pina colada.
Yeah, and so the wait staff was just totally looking at Susan like she was a total liar.
Like she had another extra head.
Susan probably had an absolutely miserable Red Lobster experience. And so we finally, bring the food back, and I quite enjoyed it. I had a great time. But at that point, it had been so long. Like, we had to wait for it. I was starving at that point.
Right.
But that was the most things I've ever had go wrong in a single order. And we're talking about it, and I just... whoever Susan is out there, I hope that she's doing well now, because she had probably a very subpar Red Lobster experience, and she already had her order, so there was no reason for her to get the context. Like, she had that really bizarre experience and had no clue what happened.
Okay. So, alright, so you told me the story before, obviously, and I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the heck out of it even the second time around. But what occurred to me after hearing the story, when it was sort of percolating in my brain a little bit, it's got the same feel as a famous Douglas Adams story called Cookies.
Yeah.
And if you'll indulge me a little bit, I'm going to read it here.
I don't think it was originally Douglas Adams. I think it's like an old like sort of folk story that's
Is
been
it?
like.
See,
I'm pretty sure because I looked it up.
Okay, so let me
read the story anyways.
So, so this is Douglas Adams. So Douglas Adams is the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's what he's best known for. He also did the whole Dirk Gently's holistic detective agency.
He's done a lot of like funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Science fiction writer. All right. Mm-hmm. So this actually did happen to a real person, and the real person is me. I had gone to catch a train. This was April 1976 in Cambridge, UK. I was a bit early for the train. I'd gotten the time of the train wrong. I went to get myself a newspaper to do the crossword and a cup of coffee and a packet of cookies. I went and sat at a table. I feel all right, this is just me interjecting. I feel like this is not the original version. Somebody must have edited it because he's English. He would have said biscuits.
Yeah.
I went and sat at a table. And I feel like the first time I read the story, it was biscuits. Mm-hmm. I went and sat at a table. I want you to picture the scene. It's very important that you get this very clear in your mind. Here's a table, newspaper, cup of coffee, packet of cookies. There's a guy sitting opposite me, perfectly ordinary looking guy wearing a business suit, carrying a briefcase. Didn't look like he was going to do anything weird. What he did was this. He suddenly leaned across, picked up the packet of cookies, tore it open, took one out, and ate it. Yeah. Now this, I have to say, is the sort of thing the British are very bad at dealing with. There's nothing in our background, upbringing, or education that teaches you how to deal with someone who in broad daylight has just stolen your cookies. You know what would have happened if this had been South Central Los Angeles? There would have very quickly been gunfire, helicopters coming in, CNN, you know. But in the end, I did what any red-blooded Englishman would do. I ignored it. And I stared at the newspaper, took a sip of coffee, tried to do a clue in the newspaper, couldn't do anything, and thought, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
In the end, I thought, nothing for it. I'll just have to go for it. And I tried very hard not to notice the fact that the packet was already mysteriously opened. I took out a cookie for myself. I thought, that settled him. But it hadn't, because a moment or two later he did it again. He took another cookie. Having not mentioned it the first time, it was somehow even harder to raise the subject the second time around. You know, excuse me, I couldn't help but notice. I mean, it doesn't really work. We went through the whole packet like this. When I say the whole packet, I mean there was only about 8 cookies, but it felt like a lifetime. He took one. I took one. He took one. I took one. Finally, when we got to the end, he stood up and walked away. Well, we exchanged meaningful looks. Then he walked away, and I breathed a sigh of relief and sat back. A moment or two later, the train was coming in, so I tossed back the rest of my coffee, stood up, picked up the newspaper, and underneath the newspaper were my cookies. The thing I like particularly about the story is the sensation that somewhere in England, there's been wandering around for the last quarter century a perfectly ordinary guy who's had the same exact story, only he doesn't have the punchline.
Yeah. So I looked it up. It's circulated in Great Britain at least since 1972. That was the earliest, iteration of the story. Yeah. He first told it in 1984, and he has claimed that it happened to him in 1976 at a station in Cambridge.
Right.
So it's possible that it also happened to him, but he's not the first person to tell the story.
That kind of story?
It's basically an identical story from, earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that. Anyways, that Red Lobster thing made me think of that.
Yeah, no, it is a similar sort of
So Susan
story.
is out there who's telling a very similar version story of takeout order getting mixed up. It doesn't have the punchline.
Except Susan's story is just getting gaslit by the person who works at Red Lobster and trying to be swindled into buying a drink that they never
didn't order.
Yeah. So that's my Red Lobster story, and it was, I think, very entertaining for probably everyone but Susan, because the wait staff by the time I was out were also laughing about it, but I can't imagine it was that great of a time for Susan.
Yeah, sorry, Susan. Red Lobster's really not that bad.
Yeah, if you're out there, Susan, that's my bad.
Right.
Or I guess whoever was working there first, because whoever was working there first, I don't know if they got off their shift or what, but the call dropped and they made no effort to get back into contact with us or put the order through or anything.
Oh, okay.
So I have no clue what their deal was. If anybody's at fault for the story, I think that's where it started going downhill.
Right. Yeah. So that was your week. My week was, I was at the World Fantasy Convention in Montreal just over this last weekend, and it was amazing. So as most people who are watching or listening to this around the time that happened, we are still in the tail end of the pandemic, and so a lot of guests did not come. Most of the guests of honor did not come in person. They attended virtually, and it changes things a lot, because so there's an interesting conversation I had with one of the guests of honor, and he was mentioning a discussion that he'd had with some of the people who were planning the convention and who were running it, that as far as the old guys go, like us, we thought, yeah, the convention in person really matters. It makes a difference. And some of the younger people were saying, well, a lot of the interactions they have are online anyways. Being online, or being mostly online or totally online, doesn't really hurt it that much.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, okay, so the online stuff, when I first started attending conventions, I thought definitely the appeal is the panels.
Yeah.
Because they're interesting conversations. They are guided in a way that conversations often aren't, so that they stay on topic. You already know going in what direction it's going to take, and whether that's a topic that's interesting to you.
It's a live, unedited podcast episode, essentially.
Interactive podcast episode,
That's
because
true.
then you can actually talk to the participants during, when they open up to questions, and after, when they're just hanging around.
Yeah.
So
If it's the right size convention. If it's big enough, then you probably can't talk to them after.
That's true. So it was interesting to the point where, this guest of honor was telling me an anecdote, and I guess I don't really want to dox the guest of honor. I don't want to dox myself. So this is why I'm trying to be intentionally vague here. But the guest of honor had mentioned that there was another convention he'd attended when he was talking to one of the other guests. And the other guest was telling him, yeah, that's exactly how their kid was saying, he thought, oh, I'm going to tell my kid I'm going to, this big convention, and these people are going to be there.
Yeah.
Their kid goes, oh, that's cool. Have a good time. Yeah, but this person's going to be there. And he says, okay. And this guest of honor felt it was really cool when they mentioned his name, and the kid perked up and said, oh, that's cool. Yeah. Can you bring something back for me from him? And that's sort of the beginning of that difference. But I think, to me, the biggest difference is that sort of interstitial space where there's nothing scheduled, there's nothing planned, and stuff just happens.
And just hanging out with people.
Yeah, that's a big part, right? Like I think when you grow up in a world where the people that you know are really just the people that you know, and I'm saying it funny, but what I mean is that you know certain people and you've known them for a long time, and getting to know new people is a hard thing for most. And going to convention where there's a lot of people you don't know, you don't really expect to make friends or meet people. And when I first started going to conventions, that was my experience. But as I've gone to more of them, I've had this really interesting experience where you don't always have to have read the same books.
Yeah.
You don't always have to like the same books.
But it's a good opportunity to build a community.
Yeah, so
it's make friends, talk to people.
Similar values or similar fandoms makes it just easier to talk to people. And there's that added benefit of, a lot of people are on vacation.
Yeah.
And when you're on vacation, you're already in a good mood. You're ready to be happy and open. And it makes for some really neat connections. So in that interstitial space, I've actually made some friends that I don't know that I would have expected early on when I started going to conventions. And I think that's why it's so important that to really get the full convention experience, the benefit of it is that if you leave yourself open to experiences like that, it was just, again, it was pretty spectacular. And I guess I hadn't thought about it enough because I just got back from Montreal. I haven't thought about it enough in a way that I can tell any of the stories without telling somebody else's story.
Yeah, you don't know how comfortable
mine.
you're sharing other people's stuff.
Right. But I got to tell you, it was an amazing experience. I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I'm really glad I went. I was really reluctant. I had thought seriously about not going, even though I had the membership and I'd taken the time off. But last minute, I decided because they actually confirmed some of the people that were going to physically be there.
Yeah.
And I thought that made the difference, and it totally did. And it was really some minor things that made it, like, if, you know, one of those situations where something slightly different had happened, none of the really great parts would have.
Yeah.
And it was like that. But, you know, if I didn't go, there would have been no chance at all.
Yeah. So there we go. And so that's both of our... Well, this one happened, like, more than a week ago for me. That's why I teased it last week.
Right. We had a teaser for it.
But that's been it. And I think we can maybe do one question so that we have a question.
So it really is a Q&A and not just a T, like it's just a talk.
Yeah. Random user AKC asks, are all the players on the Justice League team fully augmented damage, health, crit chance, and damage? And the answer is no.
Right.
That's a wrap.
No. Well, let me just say a few things. I think there's a couple points, I think, with Injustice that make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've talked about it, and because we've done it so long, a lot of times when I repeat myself, it feels like it was recent, but clearly it hasn't been recent enough.
We've definitely talked about it, yeah.
Yeah, we've definitely talked about it.
Multiple times already, I'm sure, too.
But we've got hundreds of Q&As that are up, and not all called Q&As, but, you know, with various letters. So they're actually... The information that you need to know is that they're all crit chance and crit damage augmented. None of them are just damage and health augmented because of a few things that you need to know. One is damage and health stats, as they increase, will change how Matchmaker picks teams to fight you.
Yeah.
And they will get harder as you increase damage and health, which means that your fights will get harder, which means that it doesn't offer much of an advantage unless you manipulate the health and damage in a way that you like. So when I say that, I mean...
Getting the balance right. Doing one or the other, but not both.
Right, because if you just max both of them out, I think you lose all advantage. But we like to have a more offensive team, so we add... If we're going to add anything out of those two, it's damage stat. It'll increase the stats of our opponents, but it means that we are more heavily weighted towards damage.
Yeah, so to be clear, in single player and the challenge mode, better stats are better. But in Survivor and online multiplayer, better stats basically come out in the wash. They don't help you at all. And in the case of online multiplayer specifically, they only help you until max battle points. And then after that, they directly harm you. And in Survivor, they're just, totally value neutral.
Right. However, because crit chance and crit damage don't hit every time, I shouldn't say because, I don't know exactly what the rationale was for it, but that's my rationale. The crit chance and crit damage don't engage every time, so there's a chance that it doesn't. So it has no impact on matchmaking.
Yeah.
But because on average, so let's say you max augment crit chance, it becomes 50%.
Yeah.
And let's say you use gears to increase that, so the crit chance ends up being really high. Then 100% of the time, you're getting 150% of damage. But if you augment the crit damage, that's 250%.
Yeah.
And if you have a flashpoint team, you double that. Mm-hmm. So what it means is that your damage output is, even if you only stick to the 50%,
yeah,
you
get 75% more damage on average.
Right.
Just by doing those upgrades, assuming no gear. And so that, obviously, that affects stacks with gear, but you essentially get 75% boost to your damage with crit chance and crit damage. It doesn't get calculated into any stat, and so you get to smuggle it in without making any matchmaking harder.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there we go. That's our one question this week.
Yeah. This is the Red Lobster episode.
We have a lot for other weeks. Okay. This is the Red Lobster and World Fantasy Convention episode. But to finish up,
actually, before I say that, so the lesson for Red Lobster is, the moral story. I want to sum it up. The moral story of Red Lobster is, calling does not save you time, because if you hadn't called and you just shown up, you would have missed the fight.
Yeah.
and you would have placed your order, and you probably would have gotten your order about as quickly, but you would be out one really cool story.
We would have gotten our order faster, actually, because of the half hour we spent on the phone.
That's correct.
Because all the driving time, plus the waiting while we're there, plus the half hour we spent on the phone, it wouldn't have saved any time.
You would have been faster just not calling, showing up. So the moral story is don't call Red Lobster. That's the lesson.
The moral of the story is do call Red Lobster, apparently, because it'll give you one of the most entertaining customer support experiences that you've ever had to deal with. Yeah.
That's it.
So to finish up here, we'd like to give a huge thank you to, I'd like to give a shout out to Eliza Tiny Socks Caton. She only wears those tiny socks that don't cover the ankle, and she suffers the consequence for it.
Well, there are socks that don't cover ankles?
You know, like those socks that are really low? Like ridiculously
don't they all
low?
cover the ankle? Like,
no,
even they're low?
Some really low ones don't, so they don't show up, but they also ride off your heel easily and instantly. And so this shout out was brought to you by Eliza, who wrote this one. But I'd also like to give a second shout out to long socks. They're warm, they're comfy, and they never slide down. Long socks. Try them. I like longer socks in general. So there we go. And we'd also like to give a huge thank you to the lovely folks who support us on Patreon and give us money to do stuff like talk about Red Lobster ordering experience for, around 20 minutes, which is... You're very generous and we're very indulgent. So that's a huge thank you too.
That would be Victor Gomez, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word. Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo at the credited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 2for1, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.